Buddy, we've got a great crowd today, and I'm really excited to present our speaker. We have Grace Creasey, who is the president of the Virginia Board of Education, and she's got quite a resume. Grace Turner Greasy was appointed to the Board of Education by Governor Youngkin. She is executive director of the Virginia Council for Private Education, which is the accrediting organization here in Virginia for private schools, nursery schools, preschools, elementary, and secondary schools in the Commonwealth. These are for private schools. She has extensive experience in educational instruction, accreditation, administration, and policy. Grace earned her undergraduate degree in government from Sweetbriar College and a Master of Education Leadership and Policy Studies from the University of Richmond. She holds a Virginia postgraduate professional license in grades 6 through 12, government and civics, gifted education, and administration and supervision. She has over 10 years of classroom teaching experience in Goochland County and public schools, Norfolk Public Schools, where she started teaching, and she taught U.S. history, civics, and government. In addition to her classroom experience, Grace has served in both scholarship, leadership, and administrative roles for an additional 8 years in both public and private schools in Virginia. She serves on the School Readiness Committee and Early Childhood Advisory Committee, and she lives in Goochland County with her husband, who is the sheriff of Goochland, and their daughter. And I kind of jumped right into this. For the users who don't know, I am Craig DeSessa, and I am the executive director of the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Grace is going to touch on the accountability standards, the new accountability standards, and try to bring light to what's going on with that. Because it seems like not a lot of people have been paying attention, unfortunately, and I think it's important that parents, grandparents, and just administrators in the schools and the school boards are paying attention to this, and the teachers, because this is something new for Virginia, and I think it's going to be very positive for us down the road. She's also going to touch on charter schools and encourage those of us who live in communities that would like to see a charter school to start talking with their school boards about it. So, with all of that said, Grace, I'm going to go and let you start.
Okay, thanks so much, Craig. Hopefully I am able to share my screen.
Well, I'm going to have to
Uh-oh.
let me do this. Wait, that's not what I wanted to do. Hold on one second. Um, what happened here? How do I how do I share? Does anybody know? Josh, you know how oh no, Josh, you've got to let her share because you control them, right?
I think she's able to.
Oh, okay.
Let's see if I can do it. It's telling me it's not letting me do it. Let me try this and see if you guys can see from my desktop. Maybe, let's see. Tell me if you, uh-oh. Hold on one second. I think it's my problem on my end from some update I did. Craig, it is telling me I have to quit and reopen Zoom, so I will be right back in if that's okay.
Got it. Yep. Oh, while we're waiting for her to come back on, I don't know if you've been paying attention down at the General Assembly, but we've had quite a few school choice pieces of legislation have been introduced. The ones that have been heard in subcommittee have all been killed by the committees there, unfortunately. But we still have some alive, and we're going to be working hard to try to get them passed. Next month, when we do this call, there's Grace. Let me just finish real quick, Grace.
Oh.
Next month, when we do this call, I believe it's on February 20th, we are going to have an update on General Assembly and see what's going on. We're going to be able to inform everybody what's going on at General Assembly, especially with education legislation. All right, Grace, I can see your presentation.
Okay. Let's see if I can get it to actually go for me. And if anybody knows anything about our board, all of our board meetings, we always have to have some kind of technological problem. So I am really excited to be here with everyone tonight. This is something that part of this presentation is something that the superintendent of public instruction has been going around the state, having different conference calls, Zoom meetings with school superintendents in every division, and mostly central offices, mostly central office personnel. So really to a lot, to a strong degree, this has not really been out in the public very well. We have started to do those presentations more largely, or at least I have, for more of the general public, just so that people can hear about what's been going on at the board. But if any of you all followed the accreditation system in any way before this new system came along, um, it was extremely complicated, very look, people who were in education, who worked in the system, who had the responsibility in central offices to do the work of accreditation for their schools, couldn't even figure it out themselves. And so that to me was a huge red flag. I came on the board July 1 of 22. And that summer, former board member Alan Siebert and I said, this is really ridiculous. And we have the power to make a change, to make the accreditation system more understandable to parents. I was a classroom teacher for 12 years. I had no idea what accreditation meant. I, I didn't know anything about what we had to do for accreditation, which is absolutely wrong. I knew I had to pass off a couple of papers here and there to my principal when accreditation time rolled around. But that was really it. And so teachers themselves really don't understand what school accreditation in the former system looked like, how they participated in it, what their data that impacted that accreditation, how it impacted anything. So we sort of looked at each other on the former, some of the former board members and I, and said, you know, we could totally redo this entire system and make it transparent and understandable to anyone and everyone, parents, students, teachers, school administrators, and general community members, to understand what their schools and school divisions, how well they are supporting students in their academic progress, and what student outcomes look like for each school and every school division more holistically. So in the late summer, early fall of 22, we started working on a totally new system. We did get a lot of feedback from staff at VDOE that worked under the former system, that tried to explain to us all exactly the inner workings of the old system. And we were more confused than the confusion that we started with after all of those presentations. And so that moved us into creating this new school performance and support framework, which provides quite a bit of information to the public now. We decided to separate accreditation in one bucket from accountability in a different bucket. So the bucket of accreditation is really something that all schools and school divisions should be able to achieve. They are those more compliance type mechanisms. So ensuring that a school has the proper locks on doors, ensuring that a school has the correct number of, fire sprinklers or other fire retardant procedures and different things in place, or the windows. We look at DCGS compliance, Department of Criminal Justice Services, their school and campus safety compliance mechanisms that they have for school buildings. All of those kinds of things, those more less student outcome driven, more compliance driven things are now in the accreditation bucket. But the real bucket that you all are most interested in is going to be the accountability bucket. And that is what and how are students performing? How are schools performing? How are school divisions performing? And we really did need to find a way to get to an apples to apples comparison between schools and get schools and school divisions to come to a place where even in school growth mechanisms and assessments, that everyone is kind of singing from the same sheet of music. And we can compare what's going on in Fairfax County to what's going on in Hampton City, for example. And so our accountability system has come to fruition over these last more than 2 years now. The board has been taking on the creation of this system in order to, at the very base, build trust among schools and parents and communities to get to a place where it is an easily understandable reporting on a school's performance. And so alongside that is how we will support schools. Historically, the state sends a bucket of money to every school division based on the local composite index. Many of you know and understand that funding mechanism. My own home school division is an 80-20. So our school division in Goochland County supports our school division at an 80% to a 20% state funding mechanism. And so what we really wanted to do is be able to backfill the schools that need the most support, whether that's financially, from a human resource perspective, from a training perspective. We needed to get to a place where we were able to clearly see the needs of schools rather than just throwing money. Now, that doesn't mean that LCI is going away and school divisions aren't going to continue to get their LCI. What it does mean is that that additional support financially that comes to school divisions is going to come by way of what we see are the needs from the new school performance and support network or framework here. And so just for your edification, you right now can go onto the Virginia Department of Education's website and see what I have here on the screen, the School Performance and Support Framework Resource Hub. That hub has been broken down into what you see here, a framework overview, really what has the board done in the last almost 2.5 years. There is a school data toolkit that's there. There is how we support Virginia learners, family support, educator supports. And then also too, what are the school division type supports that we want to get to? So here you go. This is a timeline for the development of our new support framework here. And you can see that we started back in the summer of 22. And then back in October is when we really started to release exactly what's going to be, from what we are able to see from last year's data, what it looks like for the coming year in what schools can expect from their sort of, we don't want to call it a report card because it's not a report card. This is not an A through F system. This is about reporting out to all stakeholders in our communities what our schools look like and how they are doing. There's also, really importantly, a frequently asked questions page on the hub that you will see. And I'll go over here in just a second what our performance categories are. You can see here that we have distinguished. These are the categories that schools will fall into based on the subcategories of performance that the board has determined. So schools with 90 points or above will be considered distinguished schools. 80 to 89 points will be considered on-track schools. Schools with 65 to 79 points in the performance categories will be considered off-track. And then lastly, we have our needs intensive support category, which will be any school that scores less than 65 points. You can see down here more specifically, and this is also a part of the resource hub, you can see the specifics on what comprehensive and full school support looks like. We also delve into on that hub what an MOU school division is. Right now, we currently have, I think it's 14 MOU school divisions where the department maybe less than that now. We might have had a couple come off recently. But it's where the Department of Education and the board support school divisions that are of most need of support. And that can be anything from really intensive direct support of training, human resources, central office assistance, anything that may aid the schools and school divisions in improving student outcomes. Sometimes we support the training of school board members, depending upon what's necessary, just to bring that school to a place where they come out of an MOU with the state. You can see here too that the weighting of the framework is a little bit different when we talk about mastery, which is proficiency, growth, which is where a student begins and then where a student ends in any particular year. And then our last piece, which is one of our smallest percentages in the early years, is readiness. Although what we want to address with readiness is when and at what level students are ready to move to the next grade level. And so that becomes really important when we look at whether students are ready to move from that period of time, kindergarten through third grade, which is so critical in the reading area. Are they ready to move into fourth and fifth grade? Or once we get to the fifth grade marker, are those students ready to move into the middle school years? And then, of course, again, in the middle school years, are those students ready to move into their high school years? And so there are some different pieces that make up those readiness components that the board has assigned with each elementary, middle, and high school. And then additionally, you can see that we're missing growth in high school. And that is really more around the fact that growth in high school is moving from one level to the next, so to a post-secondary, and really that's determined based on graduation and graduation rates. That really interestingly was one of the things that the board, when we started this journey to the new school performance and support framework, was really one of the biggest misnomers. I'm sure that all of you on this call, if you were to look at the graduation rate category in our former accreditation system, you probably would say, okay, a graduation rate is a graduation rate is a graduation rate. It's how many kids walk across the stage, right? That's actually not true in the former system. The former system had any number of different components that piled up to what was calculated to be the graduation rate. So that really was our biggest kind of spotlight that told us, gosh, we have got to make this so people really understand the truth about what our graduation rates may look like. We also were running two different accreditation systems, a state accreditation system, and then one that we had to do also at the same time for the feds. And so that now in the new school performance and support framework, all of those required mechanisms of accreditation from the federal government and our state requirements are all in this one system. Mastery, of course, the issue between mastery and growth has been a really big topic of conversation between board members and then also from our public comment in our board meetings throughout this entire process. Many people came in front of us, wrote us letters, wrote us emails, and expressed to us the importance of weighting our new system more heavily in the mastery area. So meaning, are students proficient? Are they reaching grade level proficiency every year? Or are the majority of our kids reaching grade level proficiency each year? And so you'll see that that's why the board ended up weighting mastery heavier than the other categories in this system. There is some math that you all can do over here on the side if you're really interested in how we get to those totals. But I'd like to get to this is a quick overview. We launched a website, this website as a part of the VDOE website, the hub, the resource hub. And we did, as I said earlier, do a lot of training and have ongoing training for school division, central office personnel, and any other personnel in school divisions or any other school board members that want to participate in those. Again, I don't know, I wasn't on the website today, but we're supposed to be having some more public driven discussions, I think webinars that are going to be done on the new system for more generalized public input and presentation. Data collection tools. This is more school division kind of lingo here. If you're interested in it, I'm happy to provide this, Craig, to you if people want to dig in, because I'm not sure that this presentation is on our website, but happy to do that if you all would like to get into the data piece. Another thing that I'd just like to point out here on our on this particular slide is around chronic absenteeism. That was another, aside from mastery versus growth, the chronic absenteeism issue has been a really big issue that the board has discussed and worked on, and really, really kind of, I would say, struggled with, considering the fact that it is obviously students who are in their seats have more of an opportunity to be learning in the classroom than those who are not at school to do that. And so that is obviously going to be something that most certainly impacts whether a student is ready to go to the next grade level, whether they grow, and whether they achieve mastery or proficiency in any given school year. Okay, so I'm sure all of you have gone on the Virginia Board of Education or Department of Education's website, but what I want you all to know for your sake here is that we do have some more understanding of what this term readiness means for parents, for teachers, for principals, and then obviously we know superintendents have been getting a lot of information here. I would really encourage you to go and look at this roadmap to readiness, understand where the board has gone in order to ensure that students are being given all of the things that they need to succeed, that we're not, readiness is not a term that we use lightly. We don't want to move a student from one grade level to the next just because they are too old to be in third grade or they're too old to be in seventh grade. We want to know truly that they are ready to move to the next grade level based on the skills and knowledge that they have achieved in the grade level before they move to the next grade level. So these particular roadmaps to readiness really outline what the board and the department and schools, most importantly, are going to be doing in order to ensure student readiness for the next grade level. This is just kind of an outline of what these roadmaps to readiness kind of in the shorthand look like. And at the end of the day, what we really wanted, because most of us on the board and those former board members that were part of this process too, we're all parents and we all want to know what it is our kids are doing in schools. We want to understand what this piece of paper that comes home that says my kid took this test and they're in the XYZ percentile, or they're not proficient here, or they're overachieving here, or whatever the case may be. I remembered I'm middle school teacher, middle and high school teacher, and my child came home when she was at Randolph Elementary School here in Goochland County. She came home with her MAPS test results, and I thought, if I did not know what all of these things meant by my own training, how do other parents know this? And so I started talking to other people in my community about, did they understand these papers that were coming home with their teachers? with their children's teachers, and they said, no idea. I mean, it seems okay to me. The teacher says my kid is fine, or the teacher says my kid needs help here, but there was never any real explanation of test scores and the progress, or how parents could support their students to do better. And so that was really a lot of what this readiness component meant to those of us on the board that were really, the parents seeing the former system in action. And so that is going to be very different here in the future when we get this new school performance and support system in place, which will be the fall of this coming year. Family supports, this is really the biggest thing that I wanted to get across to everyone on this particular call. And that is, you have your access at your fingertips on this support hub to help your student in all of these different buckets here that you see on the screen. So please, 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 I would encourage you to get to those little buckets and see. You can see over here a screenshot of the math resources. Sorry, my screen is covering up what I've got here. Math resources for K2, 3, 5, 6, 12. All of those are here. Similarly, it looks very similar for teachers. How can they be specifically supported in their instruction, instructional techniques, and then more specific content area instruction as well. And you'll see here too, again, educator toolkit, as I just explained, specific to the area of highest need, which obviously for those people who have followed the Virginia Literacy Act, we have a lot of the Literacy Act resources here in the reading category. Okay. Before I start on charter schools, I don't know how I'm doing with time, Craig, but I will take questions if you want me to on the school performance and support framework.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Grace. I
Okay.
think we do that first. Wow, there's a lot of information here.
I'm
We do
sorry,
have-
I know it's a lot.
No, it is, and I anticipated that. So I do want to talk to you later about how we can at the VEOA help get this information out. We do have a rather large email list that we can push this information out, but I don't want to push out stuff that's going to be confusing. So I'll get with you about that.
Sure.
We have a question from Brenda Curitan, and she says, at what point would a school that needs intensive support be shut down? How and when are parents informed of a school's performance and their rights to pursue other options?
Yes, so that is something that the board will be working on more specifically this spring through our MOU, our Memorandum of Understanding process. This is kind of the last piece of the shift to this new school performance and support framework, is the definitions of when a school does get shut down, what that looks like. And really, we don't go to the shutdown phase until we get through an MOU process, and through the MOU process is when many of you have probably heard before about the school divisions that have had state takeover. I want to say that our last major takeover was Petersburg in somewhere around the 2014 time frame, because I actually did some work down there during that process. But the MOU that we currently have in place with a number of school divisions across the state that need the intensive support under the previous accreditation system, that is still in operation right now. The board will be this spring. We are kind of finalizing for first review, I believe in either March or April. The move to work on and discuss an entirely new memorandum of understanding that would more strategically and much more strongly. Right now, our current MOU system has 0 teeth. There is nothing there are no enforcement mechanisms in our current memorandum of understanding between local school divisions and the state, other than monitoring meetings, really, for lack of a better way to explain it, where the state says, how are you doing on making progress in X, Y, or Z? Um, and that's really kind of it. There is nothing that says we're going to shut you down, we're going to come take you over, or the state's going to come and take you over. Uh, that is going to change in the new MOU. There are going to be more significant requirements for school divisions. I'll just say one that we've been working on is requiring local school divisions to actually, that are in an MOU status, they have to come to the Board of Education and they have to talk to us about the progress that they are making in the new MOU, which will very clearly outline needed change, because obviously every school and school division is going to be different. They'll have different weaknesses, and how they are addressing those issues of weakness, and what student outcomes are changing because of the changes that they're making to improve on those weaknesses. So that was one of my biggest issues as we continue to work into this new, I hate to say accountability system, but it is what it is. So making sure that schools are clear on what the requirements are for improvement, or what the needs are for improvement, and the required steps to get there. That's how the MOU process is going to work in the future.
So there could be at a point where a school just isn't meeting the standards you guys are requiring. You've given them plenty of opportunities for the MOU. Is there a time at which the school could be taken over by the state?
Yes, and that's outlined in the new MOU that will be coming out, I think, for first review in either March or April.
Do you anticipate a lot of we're going to discover a lot of schools are not meeting the standards that you guys are setting now?
What I believe is going to happen is that communities believe schools are doing something really well that in fact they may not be doing really well. I think that some communities think that schools are doing some things really poorly that they may not be doing so poorly. So I think it's going to be really an interesting but very transparent examination coming soon. And that is going to be something that will be very public. That's a point that the board has really wanted to make here. Those reports will be very public to schools and school divisions, to parents, to students, to teachers. Everyone who is a part of that community needs to know what can be done to help those schools do better,
Yeah.
because our kids deserve better.
There's opposition. I understand there's a couple of bills in the session, General Assembly now, to delay a year. Why would anybody want to delay this process if we're trying to improve how the schools are performing? We're trying to improve the way the schools perform. What is the reasoning behind these bills?
I think that the reasoning behind the bills is to get the adults in the room comfortable. And really and truly, a teacher does not sign up to be a teacher because they want to be a comfortable, day in, day out, I'm doing the same thing. I mean, a teacher wants to see their students do the best that they can do. A teacher walks into a classroom every day to make sure, or at least I did when I was in the classroom, I wanted to make sure that my students could learn everything they could possibly learn. I honestly, I do believe it's a political argument at this point, because everyone truly understands that our kids deserve more than excuses from adults that we've got to do better.
Yeah. So I got a couple questions having to do with process, especially when it comes to the intensive support. I don't know if you can see the questions there.
Yeah.
Mike Callen in Virginia Beach is asking, what are the steps involved in offering intensive support before school is considered shut down?
Yeah, so intensive support is going to be different for every school division or every school specifically. So there's going to be in the MOU process, at least for right now, it may be different at the end. A certain percentage of schools must be in that intensive support or off-track category to go into an MOU with the state. Those particular schools that are designated as needs intensive support, that may be something where, let's say, there are major issues in student reading outcomes, for example. There may be a requirement that let's use an elementary school as an example. So reading outcomes in students at X elementary school are so significant that drops the school into a needs intensive support category. That would mean that likely those supports that would be given to that school would be specifically around training teachers on instructional practices to improve student outcomes. Realizing that I'm thumbs upping. Training teachers on improving student outcomes in the reading area. Maybe it relates to how teachers need to do better in small group settings, or it may even involve the need for additional reading specialists to be kind of deployed into that particular school. So it can really run the gamut of what kind of supports are offered. It's really going to depend on that specific or those specific weaknesses that are targeted through the identification of the system.
So I would imagine that a follow-up to that would be a similar answer. And that question that Melinda asks is, how does the state fulfill their obligation to educate every child if the schools are shut down?
Yeah, let me just reiterate very clearly, we're not shutting down schools. If anyone is the use of the terminology shutting down schools at this point in the world is really around local school divisions have that authority, and usually that's done based on a lack of enrollment and the need to consolidate schools. The state's not coming in to shut down any school that's a part of or school division that is, it even in an MOU status at this point, that has not come across our radar as a shutdown opportunity. So I wouldn't ever use that terminology. We believe that this new framework is going to support schools in a very swift manner to hopefully in some of those off track or even some of the needs intensive support schools, get them. The goal is, and the onus is really on how the state supports those schools to get them to move up a category as quickly as possible. Our goal is to have all schools in that distinguished category. And we know, logically that that's not probably going to be possible, but that's the goal.
How or when are the parents going to be informed about the progress of the schools and the rating system that you've developed?
Yes, so that's going to be an annual process. And again, in the new MOU that we will be working on as a board in the spring, we will actually, obviously the communication, the conversation between the board and school divisions is going to be very public. We want to ensure that school divisions that have schools in those categories, that information is very clearly, very transparently, and very timely communicated to the communities where they are.
We have one more question here. Why are you expecting that typically high-performing schools will no longer be considered high-performing?
I wouldn't say that they would be no longer considered high performing. I would say that right now, because of how general our system of accreditation is, we're seeing that there are maybe weaknesses in some high performing schools that are being masked. And so I think it's important for communities to understand that even though there may be a high performing school, just like I have weaknesses, everyone has a weakness. And so we want to get our schools to see what they need to work on because just like I do, schools, everyone needs to work on something to better themselves. But what I would say is another point of this system too is those high performing schools around the Commonwealth, the accreditation system that we were used to, this was the bar. And when everyone reached that bar, you didn't get credit for being better. No school got credit for being better than this bar that was set. And I always thought that that was not encouraging our schools or school divisions to be better than this bar that was set. Although many of them were, they weren't getting credit for that. And so that's also built into this system that our schools who go above and beyond the expectation of, student outcomes are really going to be highlighted and praised and rewarded for that.
I think that's great because certainly incentives are important drivers for performance, right? Um, one last question, and I do want to get onto charter schools. Um, it's going to cost money to
Sure.
help these, especially these schools that are not performing well. I assume the state will come up with some of that funding. Will they have the ability to require the local school division to come up with more resources?
So that's a question that's above my pay grade, the latter part of that. Whether or not school divisions are going to be required to come up with some of that funding themselves. As it relates to the school performance and support framework, when we designate any particular weakness, a lot of these things, y'all, they don't take money. A lot of things to help improve weaknesses in a school division or a school, it just takes a different way of thinking or a different way of addressing the problem. In a lot of cases, it's not always a situation where we have to put money in those particular we don't have to throw a pot of money at a school. What I would say is that yes, the schools that need particular supports, that need additional assistance based on the weaknesses that come out of their ratings through the support system, we will be able to fund those things using the existing means by which we fund the Office of School Quality right now and how we currently address schools and school divisions that need particular support in the current accreditation system tier system that they're in right now. So it's really about, it's not about reappropriating money. It's really about recategorizing based on a new system.
Got it. Got it. So one last question. What can folks on this call do in their local districts to help get this information out to their teachers, to their administrators, to their superintendent? What do you suggest?
Yeah, at this point, I really hope and pray that superintendents have been in constant discussion and had continued communication with this process. And this has been a 2+ year long process that the board has undertaken to come up with this new system of support to really ensure that teachers, parents, students, everyone understands their role. And at this point, if you are not hearing about this in your community, I would certainly be talking to your community, to your local school board and asking that school board to talk about the new performance and support framework and what it means to your school division. Because all of our school divisions at this point have been given sort of their mock scores based on the school support and support framework.
Got it. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that presentation.
Sure.
So, the other thing I wanted you just to touch on in the last 15 minutes that we have here is when you spoke to the school, bunch of school board members recently, I was there at that presentation, and you had mentioned, you had encouraged them to consider charter schools. Why don't you share a little bit with us what you said there and how the process goes for that?
Yeah, sure. So currently in Virginia, we have 7 charter schools. The charter school statutes have been in existence for quite some time, and over the years, that statute has been amended in different ways to sort of help drive the process. In March of 2024, we had a defunct charter school advisory committee. The way the law is written in Virginia about charter schools and the authorization of charter schools is very different than in any other state across the country, which isn't unlike Virginia to do something very unique. But if you go to any other state like Florida, Arizona in particular, even South Carolina are states that have a lot of charter schools. Louisiana, I know many of you probably heard about the success of charter schools in Louisiana post Katrina, and the impact that charter schools had on that part of the country during that very serious time in their history in Louisiana. Virginia, though, again, since the charter school law came into effect, I think I have something on the charter school law here. Yeah. Okay. So if you want to see what the charter school law actually says, you can go here. 22.1-212.5 defines this is really important to the whole process of charter schools as a public non-religious, non-home-based alternative school located in the public school division. What's really important about charter schools in Virginia is that they are a school of the local public school division. That complicates things in some circumstances, and in other circumstances, it can make it easier for charter schools to come about or to be dismantled. Charter schools are part of the school division. So that means that their human resources, all of those pieces, minus their particular governance and any extra, I'll say, funding of the actual school building that the charter school exists in, is not the responsibility of the public school division. So there's some really weird intricacies of how public charter schools come about in Virginia, and then how also they operate on a day-to-day basis. It's just it takes more than 15 minutes to get into all of those operational pieces, so I won't bother to get into all of that here. But for the purpose of this call in particular, we had a defunct charter school advisory committee, and in March of 2024, as the president of the Board of Education, I restarted the Charter School Advisory Committee. And one of the very first things that I tasked that committee with doing is holistically reviewing all parts of both the statute and then the regulation and procedures that the board had undertaken in the years since the statute had originally been written. Of course, the board is required to make a determination on any charter school that someone might bring. So if you want to start a charter school in Virginia, you have to go through a process by which you apply to the Board of Education, which there's more than one way, but the vast majority of charter school applications in Virginia have come by way of coming through the Board of Education for approval. That would include the process of going through the Charter School Advisory Committee. There is a second process. So here it is. A charter school can be initiated by one or more school board in the Commonwealth. So in a public school division, If a local school board has a wants to start a charter school, then that would not be subject to the Board of Education's review. And when I shouldn't say approval. So the Board of Education is not required to approve of a charter school. It is required to review that charter school and essentially make a suggestion that it can move on to seeking the approval of the local school division. But again, two ways. A charter founder could come to the Board of Education through the application process, or a school board could start their own charter school. And that could be also by way of a charter founder coming to them, to that individual school board, and saying, I'd like to start a charter school. Would you sponsor that as a school board? And the school board could do that.
So this is my understanding, one of the reasons, probably the primary reason we don't have a lot of charter schools, and I think North Carolina has over 150,
Yep.
is that the final decision falls on the school board itself, whereas
That's
many states, it goes to the Board of Education.
That's
And
correct.
up to a number of superintendents over the years, and I've asked them, why aren't you approving charter schools? And go, well, we don't need a charter school. Our schools are just fine. And so there is this, my sense is that school boards in the past and superintendents have not wanted to deal with charter schools. The other challenge for the charter school is that often the funding is, they don't get the same funding per child in a charter school here in Virginia. I know Patrick Henry and Richmond, I don't know what the level is, but it's much lower than what they get per pupil in the Richmond public schools. Am I correct about all of this?
So per pupil funding is not lower. The external factors are what are really at issue. So, the ownership of the school building it's actually owned by the school division, but the upkeep rests with the actual charter school itself. So when I say the operational piece makes a huge difference, that's what I mean by that. I sat on the board of the Patrick Henry School for Arts and Sciences for 2.5 years, and worked through a lot of those issues with them. What I would say though is we have a unique opportunity right now, and this is something, Craig, that I did communicate to the meeting that you referenced earlier, where I presented a little bit more in depth about the charter school issues that we currently face. Since I had that meeting with you and the others in that particular group, I have had a number of school board members call me, email me, and say, hey, I've got this really great idea. I really want to start a charter school for students with disabilities. I really want start a charter school for, our students who are kind of in that still COVID lost area, and create a mechanism for those kids to catch up. Um, we've had an outpouring of ideas. And so for the purposes of this call, if you all know people that are interested, or have, you've sat around a kitchen table with somebody and they've talked about, gosh, I wish we could start a charter school about X, Y, or Z. Now is the time more than any for that dream to become a reality. And so if there's anybody on this call that I can help assist in any way, to move to the path of getting to that charter school in your local school division, I'm more than happy to do that. We do have, and I have this link here I wanted to share with you. I'll stick it in the chat so that you can see, everybody is able to see the chat, right, Craig?
Yeah, they should be. I mean, if
Okay.
they click on it in their
This is the charter school page at the Virginia Department of Education's website. It specifically outlines all of the new criteria and the new application that the Charter School Advisory Committee created back over the summer. That new application is much more robust and in a much better presentation than it was in the past, our desire was to ensure that anyone who was coming to the board with the charter application would absolutely be ready to hand that application off to their local school division. We kind of preemptively and proactively worked really, really, really hard to get to a point where those people who might be applying for charter school or to start a charter school, that they were as ready as possible with as many questions, with as many I's dotted and T's crossed as they possibly could have before they got to the local school board, where we knew they would have the grilling probably to get that school off the ground. So
Yeah, you've got some interest in the chat here already, and we do have a question. Given that the local school boards are responsible for governance, is it more advisable for the school superintendents to put forth the recommendation to the school board? My experience is superintendents don't have a lot of interest in school boards.
Superintendents don't have a lot of interest in
I mean,
more
in
than
not school boards,
what's
but in
your
charter schools.
typical school. They don't have a really interest unless they're coming from other states where they're familiar with charter schools. That's where we have seen, some interest that has been given a few more legs, a little bit more excitement. But I do really believe that it's going to be the responsibility of the community to really push that. And your school board members are supposed to be responsive to those requests, at least to listen to what a charter founder might have to say. Or, I mean, you may get some legs there, you may not, but if someone who wants to start a charter school wants to come through the process to the Board of Education, we now have an actively ready committee to take that application on, and we will absolutely have that committee shepherd those people through that process.
So I really appreciate your time today, Grace. We're closing in on 8 o'clock, and I like to do it for an hour, and it's late. I really appreciate everything. I can tell you've worked very hard over the last several years on the Board of Education, and I know all the other members have as well. We really appreciate the time you've put into this. I'm excited about these new accountability standards, and I'm hoping that that these bills that are trying to delay it don't get through the General Assembly. I have a sense the governor will likely veto them if they do get to his desk. So that's a real positive. And then on the charter school side of things is the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance. It's all about expanding options for children across the state, not just in the public schools. We want to see the public schools improve. We want to see more charter schools. We'd like to see more choice in the public schools as well as outside the public schools. So we really appreciate what you've done with the committee, the charter school approval committee, I guess. And we'll encourage people as we come across them, especially school board members. As you know, we get involved in school board races with our PAC, and we talk to them about this all the time. Would you consider approving a school board or a charter school application? Obviously, the answer is, of course, assuming that it's an appropriate application and it's got all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. So again, thank you so much for your time. I want to thank everybody here for their time here tonight. And if you're thinking about a charter school, I encourage you to go to that website that Grace just put on there. And if you want to, you can reach out to me at craig@veoa.org, and I can get you to Grace, or I'm sure that your email is probably on the Board of Education's website, so they can get to you that way as well. I would assume. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Thank you, everybody, tonight, and we wish you the best. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Have a good night.